Good evening, friends, and welcome to this special briefing on one of India's most significant diplomatic outreach events that is going to take place in Goa very shortly. As you know, the BRICS summit and the BIMSTEC outreach will be held in Goa on October 15 and 16. To brief you on these two very important diplomatic events, to provide, in a sense, a curtain raiser on what to expect, I have with me a very distinguished panel consisting of Secretary East, Srimati Preeti Saran, Secretary ER, Shri Amar Sinha, Joint Secretary MER, that's Multilateral Economic Relations, Shri Alok Dimri, and Joint Secretary BIMSTEC, Shri Somen Bakchi. The way we will handle this is Secretary ER, who handles BRICS, will give you a broad overview of the program of the BRICS summit, what the discussions are expected to focus on. Secretary East will then give you a briefing on the BIMSTEC summit, or rather the BIMSTEC outreach, and thereafter we'll open up for a Q&A session. With that, I give the floor to Secretary ER.
Thank you, Vikas. Good evening, everyone. As you all are aware that we took over BRICS presidency on 15th of February this year. We have, of course, during the course of the year, we have planned over 100 events. Actually, it's 115. And of course, BRICS leaders also met recently at the margins of the G20 in Hangzhou in September. Now, we are looking at the 8th BRICS summit in a week's time. This is being held in Goa, 15th and 16th of October. And of course, as you know, that BRICS brings the collective wisdom of emerging economies to the table. It's a new emerging voice. And of course, we are looking to consolidate our areas in a range of areas that have been identified for cooperation. So before I come to the program and how we see what will be the outcomes, let me give you an overview of what has happened. This year we started, the theme for BRICS chairmanship was actually, it was an expansion of the word BRICS, building responsive, inclusive, and collective solutions. And the main theme was people-to-people contact, which included youth engagement, dissemination of BRICS across the country, which was a great priority for us. We took it to nearly 20 states in the country. And the other emphasis that our leadership wanted was to have increased business-to-business interactions and people-to-people interaction. And this was articulated by Prime Minister both at UFA and Fortaleza. And so what we did was we basically translated them in a number of innovative initiatives, which I'll just run through. To give you an overview, 115 events included 2 parliamentary meetings, 15 ministerial level meetings, 56 senior officials meeting, working groups, expert groups, 27 workshops, 3 track 2 events, and 5 events along the business pillar. Now, we also hosted the first ever BRICS Women Parliamentarians Forum in Jaipur. And of course, their focus was sustainable developmental goals. Then the BRICS Parliamentary Forum, which is chaired by our own, which is led actually by our speaker, will be held later this month in Geneva. One key meeting that we have, that happened was last month was BRICS NSAs. I think, and a major outcome has been that we have formalized a BRICS Forum on Security Matters, which will be chaired by NSAs. This will consist of 3 working groups, which will focus on counterterrorism, cyber security, and BRICS energy security dialogue. And the NSAs will be the sort of provide the umbrella for these 3 working groups. We also next week, as you know, will be the first BRICS trade fair. This had never happened before, which is being organized by FICCI. We have an overwhelming response from all the BRICS countries. And of course, I don't know if they have briefed you, but the focus there really is on innovation, innovative technologies, on startups, on manufacturing. And we are looking at a very good participation from all the major companies from the BRICS countries. Trade ministers will be here for that. In addition, as you know, there is a standing business council meet where 5 top CEOs from each country interacts over the year. In fact, they meet twice or thrice. And they would be presenting a report at the summit. Here, of course, the India chair is Mr. Kamar, Mr. Omkar Kanwar. And their focus, likely recommendations, of course, because they are still finalizing it, basically would be on looking at a social services agreement between BRICS, a financial services framework, strengthening of local capital markets, and a BRICS angel investor network is something that they are going to most likely recommend. They have also in the past focused on ease of doing business, reducing of trade barriers, development of skills within BRICS countries, and an intra-regional approach to trade. And of course, as you know, the trade and business is an important pillar of BRICS cooperation. On the track 2 events, we had academic forum, we had the think tank council meetings, and the BRICS civil forum. These reports and their recommendations are already in the public domain. Perhaps you would have already seen it. In terms of the institution building, because India has always focused on institution building. As you know, that the NDB, the New Development Bank, which was initially called as BRICS Bank, was an India suggestion in 2012, which started functioning last year. So now we are looking at creating BRICS Agricultural Research Platform. We are also negotiating a BRICS Railway Network, Research Network. We have actually agreed on creating a BRICS Sports Council. In this connection, I may point out that the first under-17 BRICS football tournament started on 5th in Goa. It will finish on 15th. The 3 other agreements that have already been agreed are MOU on environmental cooperation, regulation on BRICS customs cooperation, and an MOU on cooperation between diplomatic academies of BRICS. Of course, there are a number of other ideas that are being discussed, but I think since we have not reached an agreement, I am not listing it out here. Perhaps next year you will hear. But another great initiative after the academic forum, etc., that ORF has taken is the first ever BRICS documentation center is being started by ORF. It will be, of course, located in Delhi, but that will become the resource base for all that BRICS has done. In terms of all the documents that any researcher would ever need would be available at one point. As far as the summit agenda is concerned, the agenda normally is drawn up in very large, sort of broad brush way. So we will be looking at global economic and political situation, and obviously terrorism is a very important part of that. Then we will look at global growth prospects, role of BRICS in leading this global growth and our contributions to it. Then in way forward, we'll look at BRICS and BRICS cooperation with other emerging economies. Plus, of course, the issues of climate change, SDGs, financing for development, which is a key institution we have formed as NDB, and how to increase people-to-people contact. In this connection, of course, I don't know if you have noticed that there was the first ever tourism convention we organized of all the BRICS countries, and we hope to build on this. In terms of the participation, we have confirmation from all the BRICS leaders. We have President Temer, President Putin, President Xi Jinping, and President Zuma for BRICS. But last 2 summits, we have had a BRICS outreach. Now that normally regional countries are invited, each host decides who all to invite. And because of our Look East policy, etc., we decided that the group that we will invite is BIMSTEC. So we have confirmation from all the BRICS partners. We have Prime Minister of Thailand, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Bhutan coming. We have President of Sri Lanka who will participate. And from Myanmar, we will have the State Councillor Aung San Suu Kyi participating. In terms of the programming, basically it is 15th and 16th. It's a 2-day event. And normally the BRICS summit starts with an informal dinner, which will be held on 15th in Goa, which at that event we are also trying to, because that will also be the final of the Under-17 World Cup football. So we'll try and bring all the football 5 captains to meet the leaders and perhaps have a photo op with them. Then the main summit day is 16th, which will start with, of course, a group photo, then a restricted meeting of the 5 BRICS leaders, then a working luncheon. Then leaders will meet the Business Council and accept the report from them. And then there will be the first time a briefing by the NDB president, Mr. Kamath, because they have completed a year of functioning. They have issued the first loan, so they would be coming and presenting a report, after which we'll have a plenary, and then Prime Minister, all the leaders would be present, but Prime Minister would address the media. There will be a leader's statement at the end. And then in the afternoon, evening of 16th, there would be this, of course, first there will be a BIMSTEC meeting, which of course our Prime Minister will chair. That will be more of a retreat sort of a format. Then there would be a meeting of the BRICS and the BIMSTEC leaders will be present. And then the final event is really the BRICS outreach, BRICS BIMSTEC outreach dinner in Goa. So I think I'll stop here. But I would request Secretary East to give an idea of what would be on the agenda for BIMSTEC meetings, etc.
Thank you. Thank you, Amar, and thank you, Vikas. And thank you all for joining us today for this very important press briefing on the BRICS BIMSTEC summits that are taking place in Goa. Mr. Amar Sinha has already mentioned to you about the fact that BRICS has a tradition of reaching out to other leaders, and our Prime Minister decided to invite leaders of the BIMSTEC countries. India is a member of BIMSTEC, and as mentioned by Mr. Sinha, we are absolutely delighted that all the leaders from the BIMSTEC region have kindly accepted our Prime Minister's invitation, and a very warm welcome awaits them, and we look forward to their participation in the BIMSTEC summit. So there'll be two components to the BIMSTEC summit. One would be a leaders' retreat, which will be just the 7 members of the BIMSTEC, the leaders sitting together and discussing issues of regional and global concerns. And then there is the BRICS BIMSTEC Outreach Summit. Just to give you an idea about what BIMSTEC is all about, BIMSTEC is a grouping of 7 countries, 5 from South Asia and 2 from Southeast Asia. So the countries that are members of BIMSTEC are Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Myanmar, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and Thailand. BIMSTEC was established in 1997. It held its first summit meeting in 2004 in Thailand. And then the next BIMSTEC summit was held in Delhi in 2008. And the last BIMSTEC summit was held in Naypyidaw, which was in 2014. So this would be 2 years now that leaders will get an opportunity to get together for another time collectively as a grouping. This is a regional grouping that was established, as I mentioned, in 97. India lays a lot of importance to this particular regional grouping, as we regard it as a very important platform to carry forward the process of regional integration, both in South and Southeast Asia. Mr. Sinha mentioned that it is an important component of our Act East policy, and we feel that BIMSTEC is uniquely positioned as a bridge between the two regions. Especially, it helps to put the northeastern states of India, the northeastern region of our country, center stage as a gateway to and from the Southeast Asian region. We are confident that our engagement with BIMSTEC will contribute significantly, as Mr. Sinha mentioned, to the Act East policy. We have many shared concerns. First of all, we have very strong historical, cultural, and economic linkages. And together, in the last 20 years, next year we would be celebrating 20 years of the establishment of this very important grouping. And we have together collectively worked to work on 14 different sectors of cooperation, and these include transport and communication, tourism, environment, disaster management, counter-terrorism, transnational crimes, trade and investment, climate change, cultural cooperation, energy, agriculture, poverty alleviation, technology, fisheries, public health, and people-to-people contact. Just to give you a broad idea of the huge range that BIMSTEC covers in terms of areas of cooperation. The name BIMSTEC stands for Bay of Bengal Initiative for Technical and Economic Cooperation. The name itself will give you an idea that the focus is on the Bay of Bengal region, which of course includes 2 landlocked countries, Nepal and Bhutan, who of course owe their entire trade passages through the Bay of Bengal as well. So therefore, they're very much part of this particular grouping. Apart from the program element that Mr. Sinha has already shared with you, in Delhi there will be business elements where the BIMSTEC business leaders would be interacting with the business community. And in that context, we are also doing a separate business event with the BIMSTEC communities on 14th morning. This is being organized by the Confederation of Indian Industries, and Honorable Minister for Commerce and Industry has kindly agreed to address the business community, and we feel that this is an important opportunity to focus on areas of trade, of investment, of trade facilitation. In our view, trade facilitation is a very important element, and of course when we talk about trade and investment, we hope and we expect that definitely the focus will be on discussing how we can boost trade, how we can improve connectivity within the region, and how we can focus on impediments to trade, including trade facilitation. So I'll stop here, and we'd be very happy to take questions. Thank you.
The floor is now open for questions. Akhilesh Suman.
So, Mr. Amar Sinha, we are living in a time when terrorism is becoming one of the most important issues for India. And given the fact that the way China has been playing with this menace of terrorism, how importance you give to the issue of terrorism? How BRICS will function if the terrorism issue is not raised in a very forceful voice by India? What you expect from China and even Russia and other member countries?
Well, actually, when the NSS met, we didn't see that difference in terms of how each country looks at terrorism. In a sense, yes. On the listing part 1267, yes, they have put a hold. It's a technical hold, so, but I won't address that because that's not on the agenda. But the fact is that the issue of terror is, each country is cognizant of the difficulties. And on each country is working in different arenas of the world where they are facing the same challenge, both domestically and in their efforts globally. Look at what is happening in Middle East. Russia has an active role there. In our own region, and which is also China's region. So I think there is awareness. Now the position that they have taken, the UN, is a different issue, which we will not be discussing here, but I'm sure there will be other forum where we'll resolve that.
Parikshit.
My question for Secretary East. Ma'am, in the backdrop of the SAARC summit being boycotted, there were more than 5 countries who wrote to the SAARC chair saying that the SAARC summit cannot happen in Islamabad. In the present circumstances, how much focus would India like to put to BIMSTEC as a grouping? Because a number of envoys have been saying, and this is something that the Bangladeshi envoy had said, that there's probably time to focus more on BIMSTEC and regional grouping and isolate Pakistan.
Well, BIMSTEC, India has been a very important member of BIMSTEC, and India has been a founder member of BIMSTEC. India has hosted another BIMSTEC summit in 2008, and we feel that this particular region, as I mentioned to you, that it helps us connect with the Southeast Asian region. It is very much part of our Act East policy. The fact that this region has been growing at 6.5% per annum, that collectively it comprises of, I think, about 1.5 billion people, which is about 22% of the global population, and GDP of $2.7 trillion, I think, is a very important component. So that is the focus of India's interest in being part of BIMSTEC. And the interest that the other BIMSTEC countries have in it also shows their enthusiasm. It is a grouping which has absolutely no issues. It is an issues-free relationship. If anything, I think all member countries are deeply committed to moving it forward in promoting technical and economic cooperation, which will lead to poverty alleviation, which will result in sustainable development, which will lead to prosperity in the region, which is a very, very positive agenda. And so we like to stay focused on the positive aspects. As far as SAARC is concerned, we know the reason why it hasn't moved. The reasons are very well known to you.
Just add one thing, that these are all separate organizations with different roles. And I don't think one is substitute for other. And you quoted Bangladesh High Commissioner, but that's the statement you have to see contextually. And I wouldn't be revealing a secret that this decision to invite BIMSTEC was taken sometime in April. So that should answer your question. Or the
Mr. Sinha here. You said that from 12 to 16, FICCI is organizing some programs. Will you elaborate what type of programs FICCI is doing?
There is a trade ministers meeting. there would be a meeting of the Business Council here in Delhi. It's not 12th to 16th, it's 12th to 15th or 14th. Then there is a trade fair where all the BRICS countries are participating and all the BIMSTEC countries are also participating. So these are all being coordinated by FICCI. So these will happen in Delhi. Business Council will carry over to Goa, where they would also meet the leaders. Youth program has happened actually. We had a youth summit in Guwahati. We had Young Diplomats Forum in Delhi. We had Young Scientists Conclave. So these have all already happened actually.
Venkat.
Yeah. Amar, practically every second human on the planet lives in the one of the BRICS countries. Their global trade is $6 trillion, but intra-BRICS trade is hopelessly, less than $300 billion, less than 5%. What kind of steps are being proposed, are likely to be proposed to increase the trade amongst these countries? Thanks.
See, both the Business Council, etc., have looked at these issues, both in terms of increasing intra-BRICS trade and intra-BRICS investment, which is equally important. And that is why if you see one of the agreements that is on customs cooperation is basically bringing down the trade barriers that happens in terms of if we can reach some sort of a common position in terms of the custom procedures. That itself is a major trade facilitation effort. It is true that some regions, many of these countries tend to compete, or some of the, depending on the export profile, some of them tend to export raw materials or minerals. Some have specialized in manufacturing. India, for example, has perhaps got great standing in services exports. So each one has a different trade profile. Russia is very energy dependent, which all of us are dependent on. So depending on their export mix, I guess the maximum possible trade is happening. There is a need to do more. We are not talking of an FTA between BRICS, but short of that, in terms of investments, what I had mentioned, financial services framework, they're also talking of local capital market sort of strengthening, the fact that if can we leverage the funding that NDB provides for us in different areas of, so these are all economic aspects. Perhaps it doesn't get reflected in the bilateral trade data.
Manish Chand.
Mr. Sinha, all BRICS countries are members of the nuclear suppliers group, except India. Can we expect a movement forward on this? Are we going to place NSG on the agenda? And there is also a separate meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi. What are the expectations vis-a-vis India's membership of NSG?
First, NSG is not a BRICS issue. So yes, perhaps your observation is correct that India is not a member, but that we are working on it on a different forum. So I don't think it's on the agenda here. But the two critical principles because of which India seeks membership of NSG is a certain environment and access to technology, and the fact that the BRICS need civil nuclear energy. That principle has already been accepted, and actually it forms part of the BRICS declaration. So at the level of principle, it is accepted sort of formulation for all BRICS country. In terms of the actual implementation of individual country decisions getting into BRICS, into NSG, that is not on this agenda. And I don't have the bilateral agenda whether it will be discussed with him.
Ma'am, Asit here from Mint newspaper. There is a free trade agreement being negotiated within the BIMSTEC countries, and it has been languishing for a very long time. Can we see some progress at Goa on this issue?
Well, we'll wait for the leaders to give us guidance on this one. You are right, there is an FTA that is under negotiations. There are other elements of trade. As I mentioned to you, trade facilitation is an important component, and we hope to seek some guidance from our leaders on this aspect.
Seema.
There's a lot of talk about BIMSTEC and India's low-east policy helping the northeastern states. But exactly what has happened in the northeast? Because on the ground, when you talk to people, nothing much has changed. Can you tell us a little bit about the projects there? Thank you.
Well, to begin with, as far as the northeast region of our country is concerned, you know that, there is a separate ministry of donor that is focused on that, and individual state governments are focused on growth and development of the region. As far as the external dimension is concerned, that the states of the northeast region are connected by land to Myanmar and to Bangladesh, and the fact that both Bangladesh and Myanmar are part of BIMSTEC provides us a very important element of that dimension, where bilaterally as well as sub-regionally, Government of India has very actively participated with both Bangladesh and Myanmar, as well as with Thailand, where we have a maritime boundary, for both physical and digital connectivity. So you heard of the Kaladan multimodal project. And then, of course, there's the trilateral highway that goes from the northeast region, connecting through Myanmar to Thailand. And there is a plan to go beyond that as well. These are some very active, and bilaterally, as I mentioned, with Bangladesh and the others, there are connectivity transmission lines, rail, road, air, and other connectivities, which we feel that a better connectivity is really part of an invisible infrastructure that will help contribute to growth and development of a region which is otherwise tends to be isolated. So we hope that, as part of our desire to connect with the BIMSTEC and focus on collective growth and development, it will contribute to the growth and development of our northeast region too.
Ashok.
Just fill in. Yeah, Seema, can I just fill in, since I look after development partnership? See, look at Bangladesh. We are reviving all our links to pre-1965 situation, whether it was railway, all the waterways. Waterways have already started functioning. We are doing this Agartala-Akhora rail link, which will eventually both connect to Dhaka as well as to Chittagong port. On Kaladan, the waterway component will be over in December this year. The road part, which connects it to Mizoram, we have actually floated the tenders. It will take 3 more years because it's a greenfield project. So by 2018, 2019, the highway she already mentioned, there also the project should start this year. Then there's another project, correct? 69 bridges, there's this Re-Tidim connectivity. So all of this have bunched together in terms of the real commitment. Ultimately, from idea to real financing, it has taken some time. But now it's a matter of actually pushing it towards finishing line. So in next 2 or 3 years, all of this would be actually a reality.
Ashok.
My question is to Secretary East. It is true that SAARC and BIMSTEC are 2 different organizations. But in SAARC, due to certain prevailing circumstances, the cooperation among the countries have not progressed well. So in this context, we have begun sub-regional cooperation as mandated under the SAARC Charter. BIMSTEC, fortunately or unfortunately, does not have a charter. How much of the sub-regional cooperation of SAARC can be subsumed in the BIMSTEC agenda?
Well, of course, as you see that, when I mentioned that there are 5 countries from South Asia who are part of SAARC, also happen to be part of BIMSTEC. And within the SAARC framework, when we have done sub-regional cooperations, including Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, and Nepal, particularly that is a very important sub-regional grouping where we are cooperating in enhancing connectivity. And the fact that they are part of BIMSTEC as well, we wouldn't want to duplicate what is happening in one forum, but to the extent that one can complement the other, and the countries and the member countries happen to be the same, and each country works towards the betterment of its own growth and development, is bound to, strengths of one or positive developments in one regional or sub-regional grouping is bound to translate into positive developments in the other sub-regional grouping as well.
Sridhar.
Yeah, here, ma'am, right in the center. So,
Yeah.
My question is, the Prime Minister had said in Washington that the epicenter of terrorism is incubated in our neighborhood. And at the same time, you said that this most crucial issue of Masood Azhar and the 1267 committee, it will not be discussed at the BRICS summit. It's not on the agenda, that's what you said. So given this, what exactly then are you going to discuss on the issue of terrorism? Because is this not one of the most pressing issues? And why is it not on the agenda?
But that's only something between China. China has put on hold, no, in 1260 committee or under 1267 resolution. So we don't want to bring in bilateral issues on the BRICS agenda, and because of that, I don't think we have a problem with other BRICS countries, or they have a problem. But yes, the general principles of the fact that, first, that terror is a global problem. Second, that it cannot be tackled individually. It has to be handled collectively. The third is the principle that you really cannot have a differentiated policy towards terrorism. There is no good terrorist or bad terrorist. So these are the issues on which there will be a reiteration of national positions, I guess. And obviously, you will see in the outcome document, or when the summit statement comes out, there would be very strong paragraphs on terrorism, including how to deal with countries that provide sanctuaries and safe havens, how to cut down their financing. At the NSA's level, we also actually moved the goalpost a little further, that not only look at the sources of financing, but also look at the sources from where they are getting the arms and ammunition, because how have they been able to carry on this sort of thing. So these would get reflected in the BRICS declaration.
Ranjit.
A few years ago, BRICS decided to trade directly in each other's currencies. So what is the status of this decision?
Each other's currency?
In each other's currencies, I think in New Delhi summit, last New Delhi summit, a decision was taken.
It was decided. It wasn't decided to trade in each other's currency.
Right.
A number of swap arrangements have happened, but those have been individual initiatives. I think we did one with Japan. China has done with a number of countries. But to trade in BRICS, in local currency, in BRICS format, we have not yet decided. But yes, there is, in the economic working groups, etc., these ideas are floated and these are discussed. And of course, we move forward when we see that there's common ground, we take it forward. But it is not listed in the BRICS summit agenda for this time.
Sir, Rituparna from CNBC side, ADB was set up with an intention to basically tackle financing issues on infrastructure. If you can give us an idea of what has happened, because from what we understand, only the Russians have been able to give a framework roadmap on what they want in terms of infrastructure financing. What has happened as far as ADB is concerned, and how are they going to address financing issues in BRICS?
On the NDB, well, we have been beneficiary of the first loan that NDB gave. It was about $350 million, routed through Bank of Baroda, Canara Bank, and this is focused on green energy. So because we prioritized green energy, so we have got the first funding. In terms of the other sort of future funding requirements, this, as you know, is coordinated by Department of Economic Affairs. So they look at the total budget and requirements in each sector, and then they apply to various multilateral development banks. So I don't have details on what would be the next sector that we would ask funding for.
Yeah, so I understand that there are some bilaterals also scheduled during the BRICS and BIMSTEC summit. Can you elaborate a bit on them?
Bilaterals, as I'm told, and we believe is a work in progress. Of course, these, depending on the slots and time available for each leadership, a number of them will come, but I'm sure JSXP will brief you as we come closer, and in Goa.
Yeah, bilaterals we never announce in advance because they are always subject to the schedules of the two leaders matching. So whatever happens, I will be briefing separately in Goa. To Aditya Rajkal.
Mr. Amarsenna, just taking forward what you just said on terrorism being discussed at the BRICS, Prime Minister on the sidelines of G20 addressing the BRICS leaders talked about a particular country in South Asia, sponsoring terror. And apart from that, he said that BRICS leaders need to play a key role in this regard. Now, after the recent meeting of the NSAs in New Delhi, there was talk about a global legal regime that India was perhaps interested in to combat this menace of terrorism and isolate the countries who are sponsoring the same. So would India press for this global legal regime because perhaps there is an impression that India wants to play a key role and the BRICS nations should press for the same? Thank you.
Global regime is called the CCIT, Comprehensive Convention Against International Terrorism. Yes, and that is already on the inscribed in the agenda of UN. We have been pressing all our sort of partners in all fora, and here also we will push this along. In fact, the issue which has been the stumbling block was the issue of how to define terrorism. Now, there are many countries, and in fact, our NSA in the meeting had suggested that we should actually look at perhaps we can move on terror cooperation without actually coming to a definition. Because everybody knows when a terrorist act happens, you know exactly what is terrorism. So you don't have to first start defining it. You take the act as a terrorist act and work backwards. So that's one of the sessions, but I'm sure we'll push that.
Ritu.
Yeah, my question is that the scraping of SARC has poorly affected the economic connectivity in South Asian region. So now, coincidentally, most of the member countries are also part of BIMSTEC, and the outreach will be addressing, the BRICS outreach will be addressing that economic connectivity. But Afghanistan will be left out. So are we planning something on that, how to have an outreach to Afghanistan and connect it to the region better economically?
Yes, Chabahar is our way forward. As you know, and President Ghani, if you would have remembered, he talked about the air corridor that we wish to establish, both from Kabul and Kandahar. So those are two options. But in terms of isolation, you have to see who is isolated. Ultimately, isolation is not only geographic, it's also a mentality. And if any country decides to shut its only two borders it has with both the neighbors, I think that that country is the most isolated.
Sir, you said 14 different sectors will be joined. So it means with the automobile sector, industry like automobile sectors and other sectors will be joining. Industry sectors will be participating. You said the 14 different sectors will be participating in trade.
Those are the cooperation sectors in BIMSTEC. That's what Secretary East had said.
Trade bodies
14
like
sectors in BIMSTEC, I had read them out. But please remember that trade and investment is an important sector, as is transport and communication. So the auto sector automatically gets covered under both.
Sir, is there any planning to expand BRICS itself, like including some new countries, developing countries in it?
No, I don't think there is any thought of expanding it right now. In fact, we are still in the consolidation phase.
Yeah. Geeta.
Ma'am, is the Bangladesh Prime Minister coming for the summit? And how important is terrorism, as an issue for the BIMSTEC countries?
Well, yes, to confirm that Honorable Prime Minister of Bangladesh will be attending, as are other leaders at the summit level from all the 7 BIMSTEC countries, 1+6. As far as terrorism is concerned, it is a very important component of our discussions in BIMSTEC. It has been and it will continue to be, especially given the fact that the entire region of BIMSTEC has been victim of terrorism.
Given recent events and the cancellation of the SARC summit, I was just wondering if there's a feeling within the MEA that BIMSTEC is becoming more important to push the sort of important Look East policy, Modi's neighborhood policy. Just wondering if BIMSTEC, I know it's old, but is it becoming more important given recent events?
Well, I would say that BIMSTEC definitely, as I mentioned to you, we are a founding member of this organization, and we see that BIMSTEC is a very important vector for us to our Act East policy. And so to that extent, yes, we are giving it a lot of importance. Next year, we celebrate 20 years of the establishment of this organization. I think that is a very auspicious time for it to rejuvenate and reinvigorate itself. Certainly, we look forward to directions to be given by our leaders. As I mentioned, they are meeting after 2 years collectively. And yes, we will go by their directions on this particular summit. And what are the instructions they give us to reinvigorate this grouping? What is very positive about this grouping is, one, that there are a lot of commonalities. And secondly, that there are no issues. Bilaterally, each of them enjoys excellent bilateral relations with each other. And there are no issues that are irritants in this relationship. So it's a very positive agenda.
Kalol.
Sir, the last few weeks we have seen a debate rage in South African media where the father of the nation of India was described as a racist man. And recently we saw yesterday that the University of Ghana has pulled down his statue. Would this sort of issues also feature in your interaction with South Africa?
In bilaterally, yes, including with Ghana. And this, of course, in Ghana, you're right. But a decision has been taken by the Ghanaian Foreign Ministry that instead of locating it in the university, which is obviously youth is more excitable, to move it to a safer place. And in fact, I don't know if you all have seen, they have issued a very, very good press statement highlighting the role of Mahatma Gandhi and, of course, and urging the people, because it was led by a professor on social media, that he needs to focus on how Mahatma Gandhi himself, both as an individual and his thoughts, has evolved over the period, and not focus at taking out excerpts from some of his earlier writings. So but I don't think it will come on BRICS, but I have answered this because I handle Africa. Otherwise, I would have just said that this is not an issue to be raised here. Thanks.
I don't see any other questions. Thank you all. This press briefing comes to a close.